Okay, let me see.
Live streaming is on.
Okay, here I'm going to open my PowerPoint. I'm doing. I don't know if you can see it, no?
It's a moment. No.
No? No, maybe I had to change here. Let me see. Excuse me. Give me 1 second, please. Okay.
In other case, we do it and you say us, huh?
Okay, here, maybe share video. Let me see if it's here.
I cannot help you.
No, it's not here.
It is the third after the camera.
The third with file.
After camera? Yeah. Okay, after camera here. Okay, and here. Maybe it's okay here.
We see something, but it's now it's good.
It's okay.
Yeah, a little bit more height, a little bit.
Now it's okay.
Yeah, perfect. No,
so it's good. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. We are in Colombia. We are at 9 hours in the morning. Okay, so I have 32 slides to share with you. The first thing is to understand what mean the urban imaginaries and the imagined city, and not knowing that creates a social thought. Scuola di non sapere today. Okay, the first slide is here. I put here in the left side the imagined city and the real city. I mean the real city. I'm going to explain myself or just for you what mean the real city. So how can I see the real city? Always it's amazing if you look from the imagined city, because the real is not the reality. The reality is a ghost of the real. That is the point that I am going to express today. So I prepared 9 statements of what I think is the imagined city in relation with the real city. I think these 9 statements in order to understand of urban imaginaries. This concept was born many years ago in my original book that had this title, Urban Imaginaries. So these 9 ideas or concepts, the first one is what is the imagined city. I introduced the concept of citizen, or maybe we can say civic urbanism. The studies or urban imaginaries are not of the city, but of the urban, and the urban is not the architectural conception, but the citizen. That means that I create the idea of urban citizen imaginaries. That we study how citizens perceive the world from their perception. We can call civic urbanism. Maybe is the right way to use this civic urbanism. The other side of the architectural urbanism. So I am trying to understand how people in their own imaginations and some ideas and some actions that is going to change the reality or the real city. The other conception I want to present you is the incarnation of becoming a body. The imagined city is not only mental. That is very important because usually people think that the imagine is only a mental or conception in our mind. No, it's not true. She becomes a body through a social action that I call incarnation. If we take a photo of a building full of bars, like this here in Caracas, it's not a photo of a building, but it's a photo of a fear, a fear. You know that one day, my friends in Barcelona, Delgado, Professor Delgado, asked me, how can I take a picture of a thing that is invisible? And I express myself in this way, because what we see is the representation, but behind the all representation is the order imaginary. The fourth conception or dimension I want to express is imaginaries and perception. As I said before, imaginaries are invisible. What we see is perception. That means that in one side we have the representation, and in the other we have the imaginaries. We cannot see imaginaries. You can see how I can relate this idea with the Scuola di non sapere, because the imaginaries is a sapere, es un knowing, but at the same time es un not knowing. In this way, it's not a sociological approach, but on the ways in which a community conceives the world. This representation corresponds to the social phantoms that not necessarily have correspondence with objective reality. That means that the imaginary can go in one way and the reality in the other. I am going to show you in next diapositive what I'm talking about. But the imaginaries inhabit the minds of citizens and can come to dominate reality until they turn the imagined into reality. For statements, the imaginaries is different from the ideology, because some people think that imaginaries and ideology are the same thing. Ideology, since Marx, means false consensus. Imaginaries is how the world is known and then represented, not only from knowledge, but from feelings and affection. The next statement is urban imaginaries and public space. We see then in the imagined reality as a structural part of the public space. I think this is very important thing for the study of urban imaginaries. Through the imaginaries, sensation becomes part of the public space. I want to emphasize this idea, how sensation and feelings are part of the public space. Remember, I expressed myself and I said this is not an architectural point of view, architectonic point of view, but a citizen's point of view or civic point of view. The real city exists, this is one statement and synthesis that I have in my book. The real city exists because it's imagined one. And the next statement is how the connection between the imaginaries and future. The time of the imaginaries is the future. They do not live in a logocentric logic, but on an aesthetic one. Here I connect again with the Scuola di non sapere. It is not the word, but imagine as in a dream, but awake. The difference in between when we are talking about dreams and we are talking about imaginaries, dreams happen when you are sleeping, but imaginaries happen when you are awake. This is a good difference, but inside of dreams or imaginaries, we have the aesthetic. So in this slides, I say the reality that doesn't exist. And we are going to see some moments where we can test this conception, specific with the pandemic, when the reality of the city is only through media or through ideas or conversation between people. Where is the imagined city? This is an example. Let me tell you that I had research in different cities with the methodology or urban imaginaries. So I pick up some examples from different cities. In this case, I pick up this example from Mexico City that we call the imagined smell. No, in Calle Hidalgo, if any of you, I don't know, it's okay?
Yeah. It's perfect.
Okay. In Calle Hidalgo, the Mexico, if you know Mexico, and you go
Yes.
to Calle Hidalgo, you are going to find the Calle Hidalgo in the center of the city. But there are a bad smell. But this bad smell disappeared because the authorities changed the situation, the bad smell. But after 20 years and until today, it continues to exist in public memories, the bad smell. So people feel the bad smell. So in order to change this sensation, the authorities in Mexico, they put an sculpture by Sebastian, maybe you know, the yellow horse. And what are they looking for? They changed the bad smell for a beautiful sculpture. The sales go to Anker Bread Factory in Vienna, told me my friends and very good friends of Vera and Rudy as well, Hubert, that the same thing happened in Anker and Bread Factory in Vienna, and maybe many things in Milano, etc. This is memory and future at the same time. So so if people feel this smell that doesn't exist, because the imaginary exists on the reality. Imaginary is an action. Many people ask me how can I put the idea of urban imaginaries as an action. I mean, how we can have urban imaginary study in any city like Milano, for instance, and then with this idea, we can change part of the reality, not only perception in the reality. And I think at this point, I connect with the public art, because public art has many examples of how they can intervene the reality. And we use in urban imaginaries different tools. And one tool that we're using today is specific exactly the public art, some coming from the public art. Contemporary art and imaginaries. The encounter with art proposed by Biennale 2021, the last year, is very important opportunity to deepen this relationship with public art and urban imaginaries. I was invited to Documenta 11 in 2003, and I suppose, the idea of the curator, Oki and Seymour, was to see the relationship between art and imaginaries. And I was invited to the Biennale de Vienna for Change in 2021, the last year. They say that they inspired all the Biennale in the idea of urban imaginaries. And in this Biennale, raised with the idea of museums. That means that the art is outside in the city itself or in research or science where art occurs. So this is idea coming from contemporary art and is the same idea that we've had of urban imaginaries. And the next statement is urban archives, imaginaries files. Inside of many things that I can talk to you, I can pick up to express myself, I choose two objects that let me to develop the concept of imaginaries as an idea urban files. The family photo album that I work with Professor Derrida, and the graffiti, both dominate the public space. Let me express myself. The photo album Derrida finds in my visual work means that when I was working with Derrida, I was about to work about unconscious photography. But he suggested me to work better in the family photo album as an archive. Derrida is very famous very well known in the idea of what mean the archive. So archives in Derrida is not only a deposit of things, but is a deposit of ideas. The ideas of how you can change with the only idea how you can change the reality. In fact, Derrida was part of the construction of Beaubourg in Paris. So it's a very good time where people coming from philosophy can work in the architectural construction. So I come back to the family photo album and what I found the first time, because before myself and Derrida, no one was writing and thinking about family photo album as an object for the social science and philosophy. So for first time, this kind of domestic visual reads are studied. Let's see some findings. Baby footprints or the body weights, like piece of hair or nails, evacuation organs. This conception is coming from Lacan, the residue of Lacan, which means the original desire. So when you have this picture in the family photo album, the old family photo album, you can see how we can find here a kind of sacrifice, because the girlfriends cut the head of his boyfriends as a revenge, or she itself ripped her face. So you can see in the family photo album how we can assist. You can see different kind of breeds that very coming from the unconscious and produce some type of urban imaginary. Or in the graffiti, because in my book Urban Imaginaries, I explained myself that we have three kind of archives. First, the intimate private archives, like family photo album. Then the community archives, like graffiti. And then the public archives, like public space. My friend Bruno Giovanetti in San Paulo produced graffiti upon another graffiti. Or here in the Vienna architect Hunter Weiser, maybe you know, makes a half like a graffiti. At the beginning, it is reject for the people on his community, but today it is recognized as an icon. A new imaginary emerged from the urban graffiti. Or here, this example that sent me Hubert from Vienna, the 10th district of Vienna, favorite, if you know this place in Vienna, is populated by Syrians, Egyptians, Turks, Serbs, migrants who do not speak German. But today they are important part of the new urbanism. And the new urbanism means new imaginaries. Let me finish my presentation with this example coming from the pandemic. I am about to publish my book about imaginaries inside pandemic. And it was a very special occasion for me. Maybe I was waiting for, because at that moment during the pandemic time, we don't we don't visit the real city. We live the city from the imaginaries. This is why many ideas are coming from the people who tell you different ideas, maybe no real ideas, but different ideas that affect your conception of life at this moment. Or maybe you see the city through media, but you don't go to the real city. So during pandemic time, we live the city inside of very strong imaginaries. The real from the reality, or many invention of the imaginaries. So we are about to call this radical imaginaries, where you have to live, like in pandemic time, the life only from the imaginaries, because we don't have contact with the real dimension of life. So I had a big data information. I promised that I'm going to prepare do the link to see my book of urban imaginaries during time pandemic. It's going to be ready in maybe 1 more month. So in this data, I found that the artists that people circulate more was first one, Maghrib, but they changed, of course, this Son of Man, their very famous picture. They changed for a face mask and circulate a lot. But the artist that circulate more was the Mona Lisa, of course, from Italy. Mona Lisa, the most circulate of an art image as like an earth here, you see, or here Mona Lisa as a patient, or here Mona Lisa on the street in a metro. So here they say in Spanish, why can't I say here? I don't know. I say hello to Mona Lisa, or what can I do? And you have 1,000. This is the picture that citizens choose more in relation to the others. And one thing I want to tell you is that I didn't find modern art images in the pandemic, in the archive than the files I have. People recreate more with all art like Renaissance art specific or romantic art. But one thing I'm going to finish, this is the first part of the pandemic. The image that we found more frequently was this one of the toilet paper. It was very contradictory that people go to the supermarket to buy toilet paper more than food. And this means a very deep imaginary how people go to find or to get toilet paper more than food. That is very absurd and very incredible imaginary that I had in my own files. Or on the other side, graffiti scare people. Some graffiti that is specific in New York, in some other city, San Pablo, in Latin America. They had many. I had been collecting many graffitis from these two cities, San Paulo and New York, and of course they put in very difficult, scary situation like here the tiger is trying to eat a person, a worker. What is finally an imagined city? So imagined cities are a very cities that we live in every day. However, there is no knowing, or knowing that is no language or deductive logic that I call inconsistent logic. So inconsistent logic, you can see that there is a relation, interesting relation in the etymology of inconsistent and inconscious, but it's not the same thing. Inconsistent logic respond to how they are collectively generated by things collective generated by the citizens in relation to the thoughts, memories, and desires. And this represent new ways of building cities and new specification of urban planning. So the logic of urban imaginary is the inconsistent logic. So this is not a logocentric logic. It's a very near or close to the not knowing that you are talking in your skull or not sapere. So ghosts, phantoms, ghosts, growth, it's time for imaginaries or radical change. So finally, the object that the object that is the main object of urban imaginaries and the imagined city are the ghosts. So we are studying urban ghosts. And with these urban ghosts, we are trying to understand the real city. So finito, grazie mille.
Grazie a te, Amanda is great, and I think we have many to discuss about what you say. I must say the dimension was new for me, I name it like this, is the contra-imagination. Is to say we have also inside of the city a war of imagination, a different possibilities of imagination. What you explain about Mexico, this can be negative, but can be also positive. That we say we construct contra-imagination. We try to bring from one kind of imagination to the other. And I see here a job of designer also.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you're right, Judy. Of course, there are differences between imagination and imaginary, because imagination is a mental faculty, and imaginary is a more specific concept that means how you see the reality from the mental constructions. So it's no open imagination, it's a closed imagination, because it's a kind of object that I can separate from the reality. So this is why I was talking about the difference in between representation and imaginaries, because representation is the thing that you can see in front of you, but the food that is coming behind is the imaginaries, not the imagination, open imagination. So it has connection when we talk about imaginaries, has connection with representation.
Bea, you have. Bea?
Yeah.
Hello, Vera?
Yeah. Now it's
yeah.
Thank you so much, Armando. I think it's like always, it's very interesting and inspiring, so much connected to our work. I will take an angle which is sensitive one, because we did a lot of participatory work today. Anna Venganozzi spoke about collective work, and what we have seen and lived is that often in context where people are forced to fight or live in a permanent survival fight, that they almost, it's not that they have lost the capacity of imaginaries, but they don't allow themselves to imagine, or they reduce even the imaginaries, and it's almost a form of re-stabilizing. We spoke a lot about unstabilized knowledge. It's about feeling of stabilization, in which you can again start to project yourself. And I think there's a French philosopher, Marie-Josée Monsin, who spoke about the phobocracy, about this dominance of fear. And as you showed, this building is a kind of one. It's built fear. It's so important to create again an atmosphere where you start to permit and to contribute to this collective imaginary. And this is one aspect. And the second, what we have lived, and colleagues of us call it, it's a school of dreaming, or of producing imaginaries, that it's almost necessary to relearn to dream beside stereotypes, because often when we start our participatory work, on the first level, if you start to discuss what do you wish, what are your perspective and desires, for example, in design projects or architectural projects, then you get a whole bunch of dominating imaginaries. So these imaginaries which have by publicity, by other by schools, by all institutions, which informing you are almost dominating your imaginaries or guiding your imaginaries in a special direction, and how to reactivate and to find out after all this external, I almost would say external imaginaries, to come to those which are the real desires, needs, and to construct a different quality of collective imaginaries. So these are two inputs.
Okay, yes, yes. In the first part, you talk about provocative. That is an idea that we learn from public art, because let me give the difference that I see in between public art and imaginaries, because public art could be provocative. You can intervene and sculpture in the street, and this is provocative because you are going to change the meaning of one sculpture in the street. But imaginaries is not like that. Imaginaries uh, are coming from the everyday ideas and dreams and everything together. It's not one thing that you can liberate automatically. It's more the idea of you are living with someone, with the people, and little by little are emerging a new idea, because the social tropes change each other, and finally is a new imaginary. You know, when we talk about in the pandemic, all these bad ideas that circulate about the pandemic, people think are coming from China, or maybe other people think that aliens from the other planet, and all this idea, little by little, becomes a dominant idea. That means that if you ask me, is it possible to manipulate imaginaries? I can say, oh, in one way, it is not possible, because when you are talking imaginaries about, you are talking about uh, people think. So it's possible, because in the publicity, you can try to change the smell, for instance. And it's possible, yes. But the imaginary become imaginary because I work with the statistic. In the statistic, imaginary means that most of the people in one community have the same sensation. So the bad smell in Mexico is not because one person had this feeling. It's because more than 25%, we say, or even when it's 50%, that means it's an emblematic conception. So in one way you can manipulate, but in the other no, because it's the way how people think, how people share ideas with the other. But we can say that it's possible to do it only with imaginaries and not with the reality. It's a question. Of course, reality and imaginaries comes together, but I wrote a book that I call imaginary social atonement, in English, social atonement. And I express myself in this way. When the life is put you in very astonishment situation, I don't know, you have the word asombro in Italiano, because we have asombro. When you are on the asombro, you live in only imaginaries, like the bad smell. But could be that the imaginaries is not under the attachment, but under the reality, and you live the imaginary as a idea of everyday life. So when it happened, when the astonishment happened, people live only in the imaginary world, and that happened. When you love someone, you are in the imaginary world. You are not in the reality. You are in the imaginary.
But is it possible to live in the reality, or are we all in the imaginaries?
Yes,
We live all in imaginaries.
in some crazy situation, we live only in the imaginaries. Some kind of schizophrenia, we can say. But in the people, normal people also can live in imaginaries. Like I expressed myself in the pandemic. So I had this rule. Could be when the imaginaries are so strong, we are living under the dominancia. The imaginary is dominant. But when you live everyday life, the imaginaries are not dominant because imaginaries are coming from feelings. So the best example is love. When you love someone, you can say the other person is ugly or whatever you can say the other person. But inside of you, you love this person, even with all conditions, because the person you love is in a very strong imaginary. So when you don't love more this person, you don't feel more beauty in this person because the imaginary is coming down. So in some moments, like in Frontier, when we have confrontation in between two countries in Frontier, the imaginaries are very strong because in some situations, people live more on their imaginaries and determination.
It's interesting. We had a whole section last week about the body and about energetic transfers, and we said also on the question of projection, and it was very interesting. One person who's master of Qigong and in the same time philosopher pointed out how important it is to relate the projection, the project or the imaginary back again to the body. If the imaginary is too much expanded, then and it's completely contradictory to what you are living, you can almost for him it's the examples of artists who committed suicide, who were so much in the imaginary world and haven't found back the relation to the body. And I think it's very interesting that from this concentration you can again go back to the you can extend your how do you say the aims
Concept.
and the projection and imaginaries as much as you want. But if you lose the contact with the body, then you almost can fall apart. Is this? It's coming from a completely different school of thinking, but is there a linking part?
Yeah. And I think you're right. Yeah. In Lacan ideas, I can return to Lacan because all this idea of the body is, the origin of desire. And the imaginaries in the psychoanalytic school are coming from desires. So Lacan was the first person who used the term of imaginary in the psychic construction of the unconscious. So imaginaries in the Lacanian school is before the reality, no? Because the reality, when you think the reality, you have one deep feeling conception. You use the mirror, you see you face in the mirror and the espejo, you can see the other only when you can speak, say Lacan. And when you can speak, you see that the other is your mother. So the mother is the first other, and the father is the second other. So, but in the beginning, the mirror, the espejo, is the imaginary construction that is going to affect all the reality construction. So in the beginning, actually, I was working really with the Lacan conception, but then I changed because in my case, I work more in social conception more than in the psychic construction of was doing for Lacan. But in this or Lacan, or even in myself, there exists one philosopher very important that is Peirce. Peirce was the person who first, than Lacan and any other, was trying to express this idea of the inconsistent logic that I was talking about. So this, I don't talk about the imaginaries from Lacan. I talk from the imaginaries from Peirce in the idea of the inconsistent logic. It's another kind of, and this is why I feel very close to Scuola di non sapere, porque el non sapere, imaginaries in many ways is non sapere.
Maybe just, and then I leave the floor to maybe others who want to ask questions. I think what's so strong and why we feel so close to your thoughts is that for you really the imaginaries have this real impact so much that they almost becoming form, and or they become form, and this can be in the format as you have shown, in the form of fear, in the form of violence, in the form of authoritarianism, but it can also have the form of potentiality, and we were together with Hubert Klumper, like already mentioned, in the construction of the Scuola in now I don't know the word, in Barranquilla, the School of Carnival, Fábrica de Cultura, which has in the same moment as a construction of the school, this idea of valorization of in former days said almost folkloristic knowledge, to see this as a very contemporary knowledge, and how to bring this to see this these capacities, art craft capacity, as a important creative knowledge, and in the same time how this building can precisely express this openness and being a partition, almost a partition to use and to be by use fulfilled, and not a form which ends by being stopped. And I think this is very important to also to empower, but also to point out that the designers and creators have such an important role, because they are frozen imaginaries, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah. You know, this building, Fábrica de Cultura, that you and Rude had a very beautiful intervention. I think it's going to have very strong dimension in Barranquilla. That, you know, this is a good example, because Fábrica de la Cultura have inside many imaginary ideas. No, it's a building that has no doors, has different point of view. You are going up, and in different floors. You have different view of the city, and it is going to be participant. It's going to include people from there, people from the Barranquilla Carnival, and they have a very nice conversation with people who live there. So I am sure there's going to be an emblem, and it's going to be really appropriate for people living there in Barrio Abajo. That is how they call this community. So I think it's a very good example of the relationship in between imaginaries, and architects. Even here, in this meeting that we had, was invite a person who represents the more important architect in Colombia, Salmona. And Salmona is a very poetic person in Colombia. If you go to see the cities in Colombia, how this man changed the color of city. Like here in Bogota, we changed the Bogota is pretty close to the Salmona color in the building. So how the one thing can change perception, like perception of colors, for instance. And many other, we had many examples. I tell you people here to the school of non sapere that I am working in two very big projects. First is one of what means Latin today in the world, because when you talk about Latin, you think in United States you think that Latin is Mexican. So when you see a Latin in the United States, they think it's a Mexican people. So we are going to change this perception with my work. We are working more than 52 communities, Latin communities in the world. So when we finish this work, we are going to share all these conclusions and results to the people, specific to United States inhabitants, because after then they had to change and they had to distinguish what means Mexican or what means Brazilian or what means Venezuelan or whatever. Because the imaginary is that. Or in the other side, the imaginary is Hispanic people. When you say Hispanic people, you put everything together and you don't see the difference. So that means that imaginary is a global theory, but a specific, very local theory, because going very inside of a community. More small community, much better. I know some very interesting.
But Armando, at this place, you really do what I say. You construct a contra imaginary.
Yes, that way, yes, and that way, yes, and that way, yes. Because in my way, I am a philosopher thinking, but maybe when you talk, I was thinking that you think is inside of the people. In my case, yes, because I am conscious about what is the imaginary. I am trying to introduce some other country imaginary as you call. Just so I agree with you in this point. But not the people. People live more unconscious their own life. They are not thinking that this is imaginary. They live the life. In my case, yes, because I am a philosopher, as a researcher, I am conscious what I am doing. I am trying to push ideas like this idea of what means Latin people. So you're right, Rudy. And the other project I am working now is with my friend Hubert, and that is very near, close to all people in this school of the non sapere. And we are starting work what is Imagine Europe. So we are going to put the same methodology. In the Latins, we speak more or less 2 or 3 languages, no more. But in Europe, the languages are so so many languages. But anyway, they have some imaginaries inside that we are trying to find out what means the Mediterranean ideas, the North imaginary, etc., etc. So at the end, maybe in 2 more years, we are going to put together Euro Imagine Europe, and Latin and communities imaginaries in the world.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the second work you do, I suppose you bring in intelligibility the variety of the imaginary.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
And in the first you try to modify cliché.
Yeah, a cliché means an imaginary that is going to the freezing. No, this is the stereotype, imaginary in the freezing, because it's congelate there. But when you open this cliché, it's coming new ideas, of course, and new concepts like Latin, one mean Latin. So that is part of very what I can say, ideological conception, because at the end it's a politic dimension that we are doing. In the beginning I was working more in the communication and imaginary, then I work aesthetic and imaginaries, and now I'm working more in the politic conception of the imaginaries. This project of what means Latin all over the world is more in the politic dimension. So political, no ideological, but political, the right word.
And I think that's interesting because, again, Marie-Josée Vincent, she's speaking of confiscation of words and images. And it's this act of confiscation, of appropriation, domination. And I think we have to as you said, reopen and reappropriate the concepts and the imaginaries behind, because
yes,
they are political, as you said, they are interest. And in our discipline, especially in design, we are confronted with branding, and branding is exactly what you said, is ignoring the difference and giving every animal the same stamp. And it became a concept, a general concept to erase all heterogeneity. And I think we are dominated by such a logic, and this is often even a racist one, like
exactly.
to reduce Latin to and even give this word a negative notion, makes this is a political act and a manipulation act. And we discussed this already, but I wrote a text on torture in our book about orientation and disorientation, and the roots of the communication science and communication theory in the States are the same roots of this department as the military department of torture. How to better manipulate the minds of human beings, and it's very interesting to reappropriate this area of communication and to fill it with and to show the political dimension of so-called inform the people. And I like this word because it's bringing into form, and it's not how to bring it in open or in a closed form.
Yeah, you're right. We are now conscious about this dimension, and this is why we are working with public art, because public or contemporary art, because contemporary art is not the object that you represent, it's the ideas that you are affecting. This is contemporary art more than the object, like, say painting or whatever. It's more ideas, how you can change perception of one place, or how you can change. This is the political dimension of the contemporary art. Many people doesn't like contemporary art because it's not an object, because it's more a way of your thinking. So, but this is why we work together with these ideas. And I had many people coming from the public art in the project, regional project that I have in these two mega projects, Latin and European projects.
Armando, our hour is finished. And it was absolutely great. Thanks a lot for your contribution on this project about Non Sapere. I think it's very what you bring at us open new imaginaries also for the school. So thanks again.
And hopefully we can be part, as it is in Roma, as it is in Milano. I hope we are all together changing this negative connotation on the and reduced logic of Latin, and to see how interesting other connotations this word can have.
I will be so happy also realize, if I can go inside of the Roman imaginaries, because really I love Italy and Roma, of course. So this is a very good challenge for myself in the future. So maybe one day I can go there, and
Very
maybe
good.
with the word that we had in Europe, imagine that Europe, maybe we can try. Thank you very much for you,
Thank you, Armando.
Judy, and for everyone
Yeah.
Yeah.
See
present.
you. Bye-bye.
All the best to Laura.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next time we speak about memory with
Yeah,
her.
memory and neuroscience.
That's it.
Okay. Thank
Bye,
you.
Armando.
So, did we have the next? No, it's finished for today.
Finish for today.
Okay. So, we can do a short conclusion.
Yeah.
If you will. You do it.
In italiano anche.
Ok. Beh, abbiamo investigato un po' la considerazione un po' della ricerca, ma anche di come medesimarsi in un'altra cultura, di quali potrebbero essere delle soluzioni indicabili da situazioni che siano lontane dalle proprie. Poi successivamente abbiamo visto anche la condizione del mondo reale e come sia in realtà l'immaginazione quello che siamo davvero in grado di vedere, nonché un modo per affrontare la realtà vera e propria e trovare un modo per, diciamo, sorprenderci positivamente, perché comunque non siamo in grado di controllare del tutto la realtà.
Grazie mille per questo. Ci vediamo domani mattino, nous voyons demain matin à 9h30. Le programme a encore changé. Nous allons avoir Silvia Dingiotti et peut-être Christophe Odel sur la question de l'improvisation. Mais je n'ai pas reçu, je crois, de réponse encore. Thanks a lot and good night, all together.
Ok.
Milonga.
It's still live, huh?
Still in life, yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Ciao Vera.
You have to be exhausted. It's an incredible, intensive presence, and
A little bit. We are a little bit exhausted, yeah.
I guess, but I think it's also, since I brought in this question of the body, I think this is also a very important energy which doesn't find in the first moment its expression, but the Klausur, which really means this exercise to go into this field of thoughts and to be there intensively and to have all these interconnections. Since I left the place, I had a little bit distance and I started to
dance a little bit.
Yeah.
And to find other, what is happening is that you are traveling with what you have produced there. You start to travel, and then and that's the interesting thing. It's interconnecting with other with other thoughts, with other schools. I was on a hacker congress one night. It fit so well from a different activist angle, and I think it's one of the important questions is how we find, on the one hand, formats to trace these kind of side effects or central effects, and on the other hand, how this school, and this I say, but he's now gone, but in context of Domi, in context of all those who are creating schools, they are creating them because there's a lack, and how this school we have created can give symbolic value can be a predicate almost, or I don't know how this can travel and can be connecting platform or whatever. I think for me it's interesting. It's good that we did it, but now maybe it would be also interesting to say what do we do with it.
Absolutely.
We do the maps, but and for whom we can maybe as a collective, for whom we can provide what, because like always we create this sphere, but in this sphere
it's abstraction.
You have all these histories of I don't know, from living to working conditions to, we have all this reality which is behind and inside. And since we created a collectivity which tries to make a different, install a different logic, representing is